Good afternoon, and welcome to the Your Health radio and television program on the radio at AM 1240 KNRY, AMP Cable Television Channel 24, and on the web at www.ampmedia.org. Join our rotating host and their informative guests live every Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock. The purpose of the Your Health radio and television program is to help get, make, and keep listeners and viewers like you healthy. And now, ladies and gentlemen, on with the program.
Welcome back to Your Health radio and television program. I'm Dr. David Morwood. I am a board-certified plastic surgeon, and I am so delighted to have as my first guest Elizabeth Lily Hills, inspirational and motivational speaker and author of the Body Love Manual. Well, Lily, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, let me give you a little background on why I telephoned you to come on the program. I was getting my hair cut, and the great gal who was cutting my hair, I guess I can mention it now, we're being recorded, we're live on the air, Leah, told me that she went to this sort of seminar that you gave at a spa workout gym in town, and she just flipped. She said it motivated her, she felt empowered, she got your book, she started telling me about it.
Fantastic.
And I thought, well, why don't I just call this Elizabeth Lily Hills and get her to come on my program? So before we go on to your book, which I have a lot of questions about, I want to talk about you. So where are you from?
Originally, I'm from San Francisco, and I moved down here about 4 years ago because my best friend and business partner lived down here, and she and I co-host a radio show called The Goddess to Goddess Empower Hour, inspirational information for women and the divine dudes that love them.
The divine dudes that love them. Now, see, I'm going to learn a lot during this segment. So you're an expert at this, the radio and television. You're going to be teaching me in the next 20 minutes.
Well, radio, I have some background. The television, I'm new to.
Well, you look like you fit in.
Thank you so
Lily.
much.
It's just right. So you grew up in San Francisco.
I grew up in San Francisco.
And you lived there how long?
I lived there until I was about 8, then we moved down the peninsula, and then I went to Santa Clara University, and then back to San Francisco after that.
So what did you study at Santa Clara University?
I did.
And what did you study?
I was a business major.
I see. So let's fast forward a little bit.
Okay.
So you've always been in seminar work, inspirational work, PR? Like, well, what's your background before you got to be writing the Body Love Manual?
Before that, I was in the investment management services business. And Business. And then I was also, most of my career has been in nonprofit. I've always had a passion for supporting other people. So I worked for the Leukemia Society and Muscular Dystrophy, and then I also used to teach charities how to raise money.
Oh, I see. Well, that's very rewarding work, isn't it?
Definitely, definitely.
I don't mind mentioning that most of my audience, they know I'm a board-certified plastic surgeon. I go somewhere, like to a developing country every year to operate on children with cleft lips or palates.
Oh, fantastic.
And I know that for those of us in public service, we get as much out of it as I think as the people we help.
There's no doubt.
So congratulations to you for doing that kind of work.
Thank you, and to you for doing that kind of work. I have such respect for it. Such
well,
respect.
You're very kind. Thank you. So, and you've also done life coaching.
Life coaching.
So how's that? How's that work, life coaching? Tell me more about what's a life coach.
Well, I worked specifically with women and men that had issues related to their bodies. So they were struggling with a compulsive relationship around food because they didn't have a respectful relationship with their bodies. They judged them harshly. And because of that, it fed some of the emotional appetites that made them eat when they weren't truly hungry. They were eating because they were tense, or because they were feeling insecure or bored or inadequate on some level, and that feeds the emotional appetites that make us reach for food when what we really want is some level of affirmation of ourselves. So I had a compulsive relationship with food for many, many years. I was about 60 pounds heavier than I am now, somewhere around there. I don't weigh myself, so it's difficult to know for sure. But my relationship with my body was such that I was so hard on my body and on myself that I reached for food. It was my drug of choice to calm my emotional appetites.
Well, Lily, you just said something interesting. You said to me that you don't weigh yourself.
Right.
So you don't feel that the absolute number is important, or
Definitely not. Definitely
well,
not.
tell me about that, because many of us are focused on the size of our body frame and having what's called a height-appropriate weight, right? We weigh ourselves.
Right.
So why is that not important to you? Or perhaps the better question is, why do you think it's important to people to know the number?
Well, I think that when we step on the scale, and especially when we do it every day, that number can dictate how we feel about ourselves. Rather than acknowledging ourselves for our other wonderful qualities, if we're intelligent, if we're kind, if we want to make the world a better place, we judge ourselves instead for that little number that pops up, and it can depress our mood. And when our mood is depressed, we're far more inclined to reach for our drug of choice, in this case, food, in order to be happy. So when I used to get on the scale, I'd either be happy because I had lost a few pounds, or I'd be depressed. And so instead of stepping on the scale, I stay connected with my body. And I'll know if I'm eating out of connection with my body because it will feel differently. I've learned to connect with it. And that's what the book is about. It's about how to connect with the wisdom of our bodies, because they can lead us without dieting to our natural and ideal weight if we stay connected with their messages.
Well, that's very fascinating to me. Now, before we get on to more about the Body Love Manual, and I see the subtitle is How to Love the Body You Have as You Create the Body You Want. Wow, that's fascinating. But I want to tell you about something I heard. I was listening to, on the way back from either the hospital or a gig, a late night gig, and I just happened to have it on talk radio. And the author, Dr. David Kessler, was talking about something that he wrote about Americans. So many Americans seem to be overweight or obese. And he said the key is not necessarily dieting, but in his view, it's changing our relationship with food. And it sounds like when you talk about relationships like between a couple, and you notice how things may go kind of get misaligned between a couple, they might turn to food. And that sounds almost like the food is being a replacement in a relationship, or
Yes.
fulfilling something that's missing in a relationship.
It can be, absolutely. It can be a replacement for so many things, for intimacy, for happiness. We use it as almost like a crutch to move us through the difficult emotions, when our feelings are the ones that tell us when we're thinking out of alignment with what's positive and true and joyous in nature. So if I'm feeling badly, usually I'm thinking in a way that's low vibration. I call it stinking thinking, because I'm thinking in a way that brings me down as opposed to keeps me positive and looking for solutions. So it is the way that we think about food will dictate our relationship with it. So if I have a challenged relationship with food in the sense that I can't control myself around it, I need to slow myself down so that I can connect with, okay, the food isn't the problem. The problem is the thoughts that are driving me to reach for food when it's really not food that I'm hungry for. If my body's not telling me I'm hungry, but my mind is telling me I've got so much to get done, I haven't done enough, I look so fat, all of those thoughts are what make me want to go for that piece of cake or that half gallon of ice cream, because I'm feeling so tense about it that I want to shut that feeling down. But that feeling is important. They're the communications from our soul.
Well, Lily, that's fascinating to me. Previously I've had an expert on obesity and obesity surgery, Dr. Mark Vieira. He's a brilliant guy and does great work.
I've heard about him, yeah.
And I haven't heard a lot about what you're talking about, sort of the relationships between overeating and the emotions and possibly stress. I know about how most experts think that Americans don't get enough physical activity, that we eat too many high-density calorie foods. But it sounds to me like you've been thinking and perhaps writing about sort of stress levels leading to overeating. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
So do you think that when people get, say, stressed out or get overstressed, they tend to reach for snacks and food that perhaps they don't need really?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so that also relates to relationships, maybe that if they're in a relationship that is not totally fulfilling to them, might lead to overeating.
Definitely.
Well, what about undereating? What about how some women avoid eating when they get down or depressed? Doesn't that also happen?
It definitely happens. It's not as common, but anorexia is absolutely also on the rise in this country. And part of that is because food is a way that we control our emotions, and it's something that we feel we can have control over, right? As adults. As children, we were told, well, you can't have that. But as adults, we have a certain amount of control over our choices. So for the young ladies and gentlemen that are dealing with anorexia, and anorexia amongst men is on the rise as well, for those that are starving themselves, there's also a part of them that says, I don't deserve it, or I'm too much, or I'm inadequate. And so part of the way they allow themselves to almost disappear is to lose weight. They don't see themselves clearly. Their mind is on overdrive. I call it the untamed mind. The untamed mind is the part of our mind that's going to tell us that we're not good enough or inadequate, or that keeps us from understanding our value independent of what we look like or what we've achieved. So if I'm listening to that untamed part of my mind, which most of us don't even realize we have, it's going so perpetually, then we're going to be going down, it's almost like having a bad tour guide. We're going to be going down the wrong path because it's negative. It's like having a negative Jiminy Cricket on our shoulder that's always saying bad things rather than good things. So if we're listening to the other side of our mind that's going to say, hey, we're all doing the best we can. No one gives us a user's manual to life that tells us this is how you do it right. We're all figuring it out. And in certain ways, we're still very immature as a society. So our society also is not supporting us in seeing our value independent of what we possess or what we look like or what we've achieved in our lives.
Well, Lulu, that is really fascinating to me. I keep coming up with questions before we get to the book, which is really the big thrust of your appearance on the program today. But I need to ask you, you seem to have a great background in business. Do you have a background or formal education in psychology or sociology? Or?
I don't.
These are just life lessons.
These are life lessons, and I was struggling so much with my self-esteem when I was younger. And because of my weight, I judged myself so harshly, I wasn't particularly happy. So my unhappiness drove me within to start to figure out, all right, why am I not happy? And why am I so hard on myself? And why can't I stop eating? So asking those questions and starting to, I went to see a personal coach. I started just taking in everything I could about how to be joyous and how to be happy. And that led me to some fantastic and hilarious life experiences that have allowed me to come to where I am today. But it really was my unhappiness that made me go within, and I think that's kind of how life is. Sometimes when we're going along status quo, there's no reason to question the way we're living our lives. But when life throws you a curveball, or you're dealing with a compulsion of some sort that's making you unhappy, you do go within, because you don't want to be unhappy. All of us want to be joyous. It's our birthright and our natural state, I believe, when we get the untamed mind out of the way.
Well, that's really fascinating to me. I wish we had about 4 hours to talk about
I could go on
stuff.
forever.
Well, my producer knows that I love segments where I learn something as well. So tell me a little bit more about the radio work that you do. Let me see. Inspirational information for women and the divine dudes that love them. Wow. So tell me about that.
Well, I do the radio show with my best friend, who I've known since the first day of high school. Her name's Karen Hudson, and she's this gorgeous, red-headed, blue-eyed, fiery, adorable woman. And she and I started doing seminars for women. First, we decided to write a book. We're on a walk. We said, we have learned so much about how to be happier in life. We're so much happier than ever before. Let's write a book. And we started writing the book, and it was much harder than we thought. We said, you know, we can't wait this long to get the information out there. Let's do seminars. That's when we started doing the seminars. We said, you know, how hard could it be? But getting women in today's society to slow down and take time out for themselves, very, very challenging. We're all multitasking. We're all extraordinarily busy. So after doing these seminars, the women would leave very happy and empowered, but they'd fall back into old patterns, because we live in patterns of behavior, just as we live in patterns of thinking. So we get up in the morning, you probably do a lot of the same things every day. You brush your teeth, you shave, you get ready for work, you go to work, right? The same is true of our patterns of thinking. We tend to think the same thoughts yesterday and the day before and the day before, that we tend to think similarly day after day. So if we're having 60,000 thoughts a day and even 10% of them are negative, you can see how we'd start to get depressed, right? It would pull us down. So the radio show, we said, we'll be able to reach women and men every week, because we all need to be reminded constantly how to stay joyous, because we return to old behavioral patterns pretty rapidly. So the radio show, that's how we got into that. And every week we interview some guest that talks about some aspect of making your life more joyous, less stressful.
Elizabeth, I have a personal theory about the overactivity level that a lot of us find ourselves in. I think it's related to communication, and how communication is almost too easy nowadays, with cell phones and texting and emails, and then the phone at home, and then the phone in the office. I think there's such an information or communication overload that we feel that we have to respond to everything. And I feel that most people really do want to be responsive. We look at that as an attribute. That's a good part of people's personalities, to respond to people who are contacting us in any way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's becoming so easy to communicate and transmit information that it's almost becoming to the point where it's beyond our capability or beyond our health.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think part of it is that the busier we are, the less connected we are to the moment. So it's much easier for me to be happy and joyous when I'm connected with the moment. When I'm overly busy, I'm so busy thinking about all the other things that I have to do that I can't be in the present moment. And the present moment is always the juiciest, most wonderful moment. But it's hard to be there when we're overscheduled, and our society really doesn't support us in going at a slow pace. It is about rapid. Everyone wants the answer right away. People are offended if you don't get right back to them. You can lose business contacts if you're not really in constant communication. So if our society doesn't support us in being balanced, and everyone's following that same pattern, it's very difficult. You know, we're a very advanced society in certain ways, but again, very immature in others, because if the patterns aren't working, you'd think that we'd move out of them, right? But we tend to stay in them because they're normal, or they feel normal to us. They feel familiar, and familiar feels good to us. Sometimes when we're changing patterns, it feels uncomfortable, and we are pleasure-seeking animals. We don't like to feel uncomfortable.
Wow. Well, Lily, I like the way you talk. So now, you know, I'm using up so much time talking about all these fascinating things that I'm enjoying talking to you about, and we haven't gotten to the book yet. I have one more question, and I promise that we're going to start to talk about the book.
Okay.
So, and the divine dudes that love them.
Yes.
So you don't talk to just women.
No.
You're not interested in helping only women.
Correct.
You want guys to get on the bandwagon too, is that right? To be at a good weight for them, and to be in good relationships, and to be pleased and fulfilled, right?
Yeah.
So in your radio program, or do you also give seminars when men attend, or you address issues to men specifically on your radio program?
Almost all the information that's shared on the show is universal in nature. We women tend to be harder on ourselves in terms of our appearance. Now that tends to be shifting a little bit. But we women are so hard on ourselves that it has made us less happy than we could be, and it's brought out the side of ourselves that is crankier and less happy and depressed, which is part of the reason so many of us are on mood medications, is because we're unhappy and we want to be happy. We want to elevate our mood. But we don't realize that part of the reason we are depressed is because we're hard on ourselves. And so we speak to the fact that when a woman is kinder to herself, it brings out her kind side. And then she not only shows respect for herself, but to the divine dude in her life and everyone else. And the world right now is in a place where it needs the best that all of us can offer. And kindness to ourselves is an incredible conduit for higher levels of joy and peace that we can then extend to everyone around us. We come from a place of abundance because we're so happy. We're so much happier, so much less stressed, and so much more present.
Well, Lily, I have this feeling that I just kind of want to get out of the way and let you talk to the radio and camera for the rest of the program yourself. But unfortunately, that's not allowed. But I'm just loving this part. I'd like to make a deal with you. If I just give a little intro to the book, do you have time to stay for another segment?
I'd love to.
Okay, so I'm going to give a little intro to the book, and then we're going to take a very brief pause for a very good cause, as I like to say, and then we're going to come back and talk about The Body Love Manual by Elizabeth Lily Hills. So I'm going to hold this up, and then we've got a little poster here. Maybe I can figure out how to do that. Again, this is The Body Love Manual by Elizabeth Lily Hills. And I am Dr. David Morwood. I'm a board-certified plastic surgeon, and this is Your Health radio and television program. We're going to take a very brief pause for a very good cause, and we're going to come back and talk more to Lily.